The federal government says it is listing Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. It's a move that comes after years of pressure from opposition parties and diaspora groups.
Our government has made the decision to list the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist entity under the criminal code.
And because of the government's inaction over the last 6 years, the Iranian regime's capabilities here in North America have only increased.
For those who are in Iran right now, it's time to come back home. And for those who are planning to go to Iran, don't go.
So that's the government formally announcing that news today, but not after the CBC's Ashley Burke broke it earlier today. And Ashley joins me now. So Ashley, why has there been this push to list the IRGC like this?
David, there has been intense pressure that has been mounting and it has been building for years. And that's coming from the Iranian-Canadian diaspora, the Conservatives, the NDP, and also one of the loud voices was victims of flight PS752. They lost loved ones when the plane was shot down by the IRGC in 2020, killing everyone on board, most with ties to Canada. The reason that they wanted this, part of it was they said it was symbolic, that it sent a strong message to Iran's regime, and also that it was a reputational hit to be placed on a terrorist list in a country like Canada. But there's also more practical reasons. So now that the IRGC is on this list, the RCMP or police forces, they can charge anyone who is materially or financially supportive of the IRGC, and as well, Canadian banks, they can freeze assets.
Okay, so this is interesting. You've been covering this for years. We've talked about this on the show for years. The government has resisted this for years. Why is it doing this now?
David, that is the big question. That's what we all want to know today. There has been reluctance from the government, and one of the reasons that they gave in the past, in 2022, was they said that it was too blunt, potentially, of an instrument to use against the IRGC. They said that it could have cast a wide net, that innocent people could be caught up in this, who were in Iran, they were forced to join the military, forced to join the IRGC as part of their mandatory military service, and that they then could oppose the regime and come to Canada and be caught up in this. So that was one of the reasons they gave in the past. Today, when Mr. LeBlanc, the public safety minister, was asked, look at why is this happening now? He said it's not because of what's unfolded in question period or what he said unfolded on Twitter. He said that they've followed a deliberate process that involved consultations or advice that they were given from Canadian security agencies. Take a listen.
I'm told that there's literally a monthly review by the security agencies of different entities around the world, and whether or not the threshold has been met, and whether or not they're in a position to recommend to the government the listing under the criminal code. So the government of Canada has concluded, after a deliberative process, based on very, very strong and compelling evidence that the cabinet received, that now is the time to list the IRGC as a criminal terrorist entity.
Now, what exactly that specific evidence was, that wasn't revealed during today's press conference. We know when you look at the actual listing that's now up on the government's website, it notes that the IRGC is a militant group that has connections to Hamas, another terrorist organization. It's part of an alliance that has backed them before. That's one of the examples mentioned. As well, I asked the Justice Minister, what about your concern in the past about innocent people being swept up in this? He said that is still a concern. They haven't put in place some sort of specific exemption, but they said that they're going to take into consideration when looking at any potential files in the future if people have been forced to serve or not, and what role they actually played. Yeah, the fine print of how all this is going to work is going to be key, and we still haven't seen any of it yet, but reaction is coming in. What's the reaction so far to the news of this terrorist listing? Well, on that point about the reaction to this potentially being too widespread, Thomas Junot, who is a University of Ottawa assistant professor who has testified at a parliamentary committee that looked at this issue, he said that this is too sweeping of a measure. He thinks it should be more targeted. He is worried that there are going to be the national security agencies who are already overstretched are not going to have the resources to do that kind of work to determine if, okay, what did this person do for the IRGC? Were they a cook? What role did they play? What are they doing here now in Canada? He said it's going to be, from his opinion, just too much of a burden on the agencies. But as you mentioned, we still need to see the fine print. Victims of flight PS752, those families, they're happy today. You know, this is something that they long called for. They wish it had have happened earlier. They said this means that the government is labeling the IRGC what they really are from their perspective. There's also been political reaction. The Conservatives who've been pushing for this for 6 years, including an opposition motion that was passed in 2018 by the House of Commons calling for this, they're questioning the timing of this too. The leader of the Conservatives, Pierre Poilievre, stood up in the House, and he went as far as suggesting or questioning if it was because the government has a by-election coming up in Toronto. Michael Chong said that the inaction, who's the foreign critic for the Conservatives, said, quote, that the inaction has meant that Iran's regime capabilities have increased here in Canada. The NDP also says this should happen long ago, so we are seeing more reaction starting to come in tonight.
The federal government is listing Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. This after years of pressure from many groups in Canada, including from the families who lost loved ones when flight PS752 was shot down over Tehran by the IRGC in 2020.
Our government will ensure that there is no immunity for Iran's unlawful actions and its support of terrorism.
So what exactly does this listing change here in Canada? Well, police can now charge people who materially or financially support the group. Banks can freeze the IRGC's assets, and people who are associated with the group can be blocked from entering Canada. There are dozens of other organizations that have been officially listed as terrorist entities by Canada. They include Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the Proud Boys, and of course, Hamas. I'm joined now by Kourosh Doustshenas. He lost his fiancée when flight PS752 was shut down, and he's been calling for this move for years. Kourosh, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, David. I appreciate inviting me on your program today.
Well, thank you for accepting our invitation. As I said, you have called for this designation for some years. We're still waiting on some details, but how do you feel after hearing today's announcement?
It's been a good day. It's been a huge step forward for us who are seeking the truth and justice for our loved ones who have been brutally killed by missiles of the IRGC on January 8, 2020. And we welcome the government of Canada, huge step forward on this.
What have you heard from, you're the spokesperson for a group of people who have been advocating for this. What have you heard from them, from the community, on this move by the federal government?
Yes, I am a spokesperson for the Association of the Families of Flight PS752 Victims. We formed our association to seek truth and justice and support the families of victims just a couple of months after the heinous crime of shooting down the flight PS752 by IRGC on March of 2020. And this has been one of our main asks of the government of Canada, and we have been persistently working with them, and many times out of the media's sort of sites, and working with them whichever way was possible to get to this point today. And we have done our advocacy non-stop for past 4 years. We know the government of Canada, they had to deal with their own situation as far as being abundantly cautious before making this huge move forward, because they want to make sure they do it right. And we knew this day will come. We were not sure when is it coming.
Well, on that point, Dominic LeBlanc, the public safety minister, spoke about this today. And one of the questions you're asked when you've been refusing to do something for a number of years and then you finally do it is, what took you so long? And he basically made the point that the government waited until now because a long process of reviewing evidence and looking at foreign policy considerations. Are you satisfied with that explanation that we got today from the government?
Well, today is a day where we are thankful for this huge announcement. I'm sure there will be times and the place where others can analyze and ask questions, as you say, why it took that long. I'm sure the government had its own reasons to go about it properly and in an orderly fashion, because they were continuously in contact with us and asking our input in many of this situation in many different times during past 4 years.
So while we were not necessarily seeing this action publicly, you were seeing it behind the scenes through your consultations and contact with the government. Is that how I should interpret that last answer, sir?
Yes, we were consulted in a number of times as stakeholders, and the big group were calling for this move and in Canada, and they want to make sure they hear us, they understand what is it we really looking for, and we appreciate especially Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister Melanie Joly, and the Prime Minister himself. They have been really spending huge amount of time on these files. And we have been in touch with the Minister Arif Ghurani, also is the Justice Minister, and also we have been in contact with other ministries and departments over the past 4 years, especially past 2 years.
Okay, that's interesting to hear. And I wonder, Kourosh, because one of the complicating factors in sanctioning a group like the IRGC is that Iran has conscription. It has mandatory military service. So people who may not support all of the activities of the regime and of this particular organization, they're forced to join. And there's been talk of finding ways to exempt conscripts, people who are forced to do the military service, from being hit by some of these sanctions. How do you think the government should go about addressing this? Because I know this is something that your group had raised as something you wanted to avoid, catching people who aren't necessarily supportive of the IRGC.
Well, I'm sure the time has taken the government to take this huge step forward. It's been also concerned about those aspects. Mm-hmm. They want to make sure no innocent person get caught into this. And of course, we are not privy to all the details. And we know they have been working tirelessly to figure out what they could do to make sure they're targeting the right culprits, not the innocent people.
You said earlier that you formed the group you're the spokesperson for, so you and others who lost loved ones could get truth and justice. Does this bring you closer to truth and justice? What else would you like to see from the federal government on this?
We definitely is a step forward, and we by no means we think we are getting the justice today. The justice is still yet to come, and that will come in form of getting this IRGC and the regime of Iran in International Court of Justice, which is Canada and UK and Sweden and Ukraine has taken action on July 4th of last year, and also on January 8th, 2024, this year, on the 4th anniversary of shooting down the flight PS752, Government of Canada referred the case to International Civil Aviation Organization, which has happened to be their headquarters in Montreal, and this is ongoing. And these two legal action continues, and we're watching it very carefully, and we continue working with the government to push this one forward. As well as we have been asking the government of Canada and through the and also RCMP to work with the Ukraine Prosecutor Office General to continue and helping them with the criminal case against the regime of Iran and IRGC. And we are still working on that one. We are hoping the RCMP will start a joint investigation in Canada sometime, hopefully soon.
Well, Kourosh, I'm very sorry for the loss that led to us meeting like this, but I'm very grateful for you taking the time to speak with me about this today and give your insights on this. That's Kourosh Doustshenas, a spokesperson for an association representing the families of the victims of PS752. Thank you so much, sir. It's good to see you.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that.